Hey, we're fired up. We're live. I'm with motherfucking Nate Marshall and Lemaire 2.0, Soda King.
I'm back.
You've wasted an online life. You died one time online. Now you're 2.0. I like the online life thing. A lot of people die online.
Yeah.
A lot of greats have died online.
What do you mean?
You just get you get attacked online. That's one online. It's like a video game. That's one online life. Everyone goes, nuh-uh. I've rebranded myself.
Yeah.
You're Soda King.
Yeah. Phoenix, I'm back.
You've risen from the ashes.
Yeah, dude. I have been happier ever since I've been off Twitter, though.
It's bad.
It's good. Bad. I've been preaching this for years.
Yeah, it's bad for you. Well, I'm glad to have you back.
Yeah, I'm back.
2.0. Well, guys, I have exciting news for you. We finished the Cortez book. Obviously, we all know that. I went back and forth. I looked at a bunch of different books. I tried two actually, and one of them was just way too dense. There's just too much going on. I'm like, it's kind of boring. I said, why don't I just go back to the Buddy Levy well? Because I like the way he writes. It's fun. It's engaging. It's narrative focused, not like boring historical records. So I went back into the Buddy Levy pool, and I actually figured it'd be nice to do a continuation of the Conquistador series. Yeah. So we're done. Mexico has been toppled. Now we're on to the Incan Empire in South America, Peru, and the like. So I'm just setting the stage, guys. The book is called River of Darkness, and it's the latest wild ride from our old pal Buddy Levy. And like I said, it picks up exactly where Cortez, after his famed conquest of Mexico, toppling the Aztec civilization.
How does Buddy know so much?
He's a fucking historian, dude.
Okay.
That's his job.
That's true.
But he goes through like these Spaniards wrote like tons and tons of letters because all the stuff they were doing, they had to constantly. It was like you had to get like a license basically to go and subdue native populations.
Yeah.
You couldn't just do it on behalf. You had to like tell the crown, like, here's what I'm up to. Here's how many guys died. Yeah. It's also really hard out here. Yeah. Make sure, think of me coming down the road.
It's like gator tags.
pretty much. They need their hunting license.
Yeah. Okay.
So the Cortez toppling the Aztecs just sent these guys all into a tizzy. So Cortez right now, He's returned to Spain after Cortez he was in Mexico. He didn't go back to Spain until 7 years after he toppled the Aztecs because he had just had so much stuff to do.
Did he bring his babe?
Malinche?
Yeah.
They didn't say. I like to think he did. He died alone though. I think they might have had a little falling out, man. It could have been one of those things where like it was hot and heavy while they were conquering.
Yeah.
And then afterwards
then she saw him kill his wife. And he was like, she's like, I gotta get out of here.
But here's the thing. If a girl sees you kill another girl for her.
Yeah, true.
They might be into that. Yeah, but you're right. Then you get in your first argument. Like, why don't you fucking strangle me? Like you strangled her. And you're like,
I will.
You're like, yeah, fucking tempt me. I'm the Gran Conquistador. So when he finally goes back to Spain, he's a hometown hero. He's actually fucked his bag up though big time because he tried to do a bunch of other. They were talking about Hernan Cortez. If you didn't watch the old series, get out of here. Get the fuck out of it now. Go back. There's 7 hours of shit you got to watch, or just jump in. Hernan Cortez, the Gran Conquistador, after all his trials and tribulations, he's got Spain buzzing about the legendary halls of treasure, battles, glory. He's just like a retired quarterback, basically.
Yeah.
Who spent all of his money on like gambling and shit, but he's the fucking man. And he's still like, he didn't die penniless, but compared to like if you discovered New York City and then you're like left with like a couple houses and you're he's definitely the Mayone.
Yeah.
But it's like he died pretty pissed off thinking, because the Royals kind of snubbed him. They're like, dude, you're a barbarian.
All right. That's what I was going to ask. Did he fuck the bag up or did they not bless him with?
He blessed it. Well, we'll get into it, but he back then to explain like his bag. They made a lot of money doing these things called I'll see the thing later. But it's like Recondamia, which is like, so if I conquered Mexico, I could do a thing, and this was like their loophole for slavery, because like I think they weren't technically allowed to take people as slaves.
Yeah.
Which they obviously did it though, because they took every expedition they do, they'd have like 4,000 slaves. Like literally human shield.
Yeah, they're like 600 guys and 20,000 slaves.
Yeah, they amp up the slaves, but the way they could make, but those are theirs. They were saying you couldn't go, and it's like a weird technical loophole. So that they were like, we're not technically taking slaves, but we do this thing where if I own Mexico, there's obviously an indigenous population. I can lease those guys. But it was like more of a feudal setup where it's like you become the lord of the land and they're your serfs.
Okay.
But that, like, when you were in the medieval system, is like you own the land and all the people on it just had to you were in charge of them.
Yeah.
So you had to protect them. That was the thing, though. If someone came through, it was up to you to protect your serfs. The economia system, or however you say it, economia or whatever. You don't own the land. You're like, yo, these guys now work for you. Do whatever. You're going to pay me money, but these are your guys. And you were still responsible for like helping them if anything happened, but these guys totally would not.
Okay.
For the most, again, everyone's different. But it's like by and large.
They're
So that was one you could just kind of like gift dudes. That was like a really popular system that they got around. And they were like, they're not slaves. And it was like, you look in, it was like they were fucking basically slaves. You just sold guys. You're like, yeah, this guy is fucking in charge of you now. And you're like, fuck. But he's got, the important point is Cortez did it. And now everyone, he was Mike.
Yeah.
Everyone to be like Mike now, the grand conquistador.
So now everybody's trying to find a new
He
place.
dunked from the foul line. So now everyone's going crazy, being like, what the fuck? It can be done. And in their head, they're going, you're telling me there's these like guys that like we can roll through if they're 20,000 deep and we can roll through 450 and take an entire awesome country. So Mexico is already under the rule of the Spanish king, Charles V. And all these explorers, like we said, are turning their greedy eyes south to the Incan Empire, which is South America. That took me forever to learn. Aztecs, Mayans, Mexico, Incans, South America. I every time I try to talk about that, I'd always embarrass myself because I didn't know which guys were which. So the Incan,
I bet you were talking to didn't know which guys were which.
It's a fair mistake, man.
True.
We all make it.
We didn't know. I was like, I don't know. Those Legends of the Hidden Temples guys. I don't know which one was which.
Yeah, purple monkeys.
I think Cortez grabbed the Egger Craig or something. So the modern day Incan Empire, to give you an idea, sprawled from modern day Ecuador and Peru all the way down to northern Chile. And they ruled over 10 to 12 million people. And they say estimates range 6 to 14 million at its peak, whatever. Had a giant road network stretching 25,000 to 40,000 kilometers, which is about 15,000 to 25,000 miles. More extensive than the Roman empires, sorry, Sean. In many accounts, more extensive. And it was built without wheels or draft animals. And we'll get into it, but the Incans, you know what animal they rocked with? They didn't have horses. You're absolutely right.
Llamas.
They had the llamas, bro. There was a llama heavy population. They too had never seen a horse.
Yeah.
So they did all this shit with fucking measly little llamas.
Oh yeah, llamas are slow as shit too, right?
Dude, they're like not even a real animal.
Yeah, they're sarcastic. I hate the way a llama like chews.
I'm with you on that. They have a fucking weird attitude, and they don't have the pulling power of a horse. You can like just ride a llama, as far as I know.
It's just riding. Yeah,
just ride. It's giving you some goofy ass fucking look, and you're like, the fuck is your problem?
Oh, they're so ugly.
Yeah, they're so funny. They look like a Jim Henson creation.
Yeah, we were going to battle and you rode up on llamas and I rode up on a horse. I know from the jump we got this.
The llama's going to be afraid. Your animal's going to be like, no. You're like, dude, fucking chill. Horses fucking rule, by the way.
Why'd you bring me into battle?
Yeah. I just want you.
Yeah, just like yeah. Please throw that to the cam. That's what they're working with, dude. They built the Incan Empire on those. Just a llama.
Like that's a crazy.
Yeah, dude. You pull up, you're not getting anything done. Just looking at that dumb animal's face, and you're like, we got to fight these guys in metal on the giant horses. Yeah, it's not looking good for the Incans off the bat. They spend so much time with Cortez fighting the Aztecs, bro. They dedicate like a paragraph to these guys fighting the Incans. It's really embarrassing. But like as we've learned though, smallpox, like the Aztecs, smallpox had already swept through these indigenous populations like a biblical plague. It was around 1525, 1528 via trade routes. And they had actually, smallpox had killed the emperor, Huayna Capac, his heir, and countless others, which had triggered a brutal civil war. This is all right as the Spaniards are gearing up to go here. This is what's going on right now.
Yeah.
The Spaniards are turning their eyes towards the Incan Empire. Meanwhile, Smallpox, by killing the emperor and his heir, triggered a brutal civil war between his sons Huascar and Atahualpa. So the Incan Empire, it's massive, it's grand like the Aztec Empire, but it was like Cortez fought the Aztecs pre-smallpox, where they're coming in smallpox and a massive civil war that's like tearing the whole thing apart.
So they kind of came in at the perfect time to run through that.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. So then the two main characters of this tale, we have Cortez is kind of just, they hang his jersey up in the rafters. We have Gonzalo Pizarro, who's a brother of the famous Francisco Pizarro, and his lieutenant, Francisco Orellana, Orellana. Yeah, double L makes Y sound in Spanish. Orellana.
I like Gons.
You like Gonzo Pizarro? Yeah. Well, okay. You're about to find out what he's up to. But so in the River of Darkness isn't so much like, Conquistadors about fighting the Aztecs. River of Darkness is about these two people who, well, actually only one of them technically does it, who navigates the entirety of the Amazon River.
Yeah.
So like you catch it in, I forget where, somewhere in Peru maybe, and then it goes all the way out to the ocean. So that's like, it's just massive. It was terrifying.
Had they seen any of the Amazon before?
No, they didn't even know what the fuck it was.
That's like going to another planet.
It literally, it exactly is what it is. And they were like, we're rolling up on dudes with gold, relatively easy terrain. And they hit the Amazon jungle and are just like, fuck. Dude, these guys have horses. So they're going, what the fuck? What are we? They eat the horses for the most part. But it's like the Amazon. It's like one guy navigating the Amazon, and it was still populated with a ton of tribes. Like it hadn't totally fallen yet.
Okay.
So it was like the empire itself had fallen, but you still have, just like in the Aztecs, there was like the main Aztec civilization and just a bazillion warring factions that were littered throughout the thing. So this is a more of a story about exploration, and there's some warfare, but it's very exploration heavy. How long can a guy and multiple people navigate a massively, like they had no context for this kind of river. That's how fucked up it was. They were just like, this place is nuts.
Do you think they lost horses to pythons? Like anacondas? Like
Definitely. They were like seeing pythons and being like, what the fuck? And they would strangle a person in their sleep.
Yeah. Damn.
Yeah, dude. And it's like there's alligators fucking snapping while you're, and a lot of these guys are just like, and we'll get into it, they just like commandeered canoes.
Yeah.
You're on canoes, rafts. Sometimes they'd have to swim across. It's kind of fucked up.
The first time you see any of those without like knowing that exists, that's like seeing monster after monster.
Yeah, dude. Spiders the size of your hand. And the bird calls all day long are just like, so yeah, these guys were fucked up. They thought shit was sweet.
It's monkeys too.
Oh, big time.
Nasty monkeys.
Yep. They big time. These guys, So here's the thing. It's the two main characters of this story are Gonzalo Pizarro, like we said, brother of the famous Francisco Pizarro, there's apparently these 5 Pizarro brothers who are they're really well known in this time. And then his lieutenant, also like their cousin by some weird connection, Francisco Orellana. River, I kind of nailed that. Thank you for the halftime show for bringing me up to speed. River of Darkness is the story of their insane quest to conquer these lands, chasing wild rumors of the land of cinnamon, País de la Canela, was the primary goal, was that they were like, we're about to get a fuck ton of cinnamon. And then as that was going on, legends of a place called El Dorado, the mythical kingdom ruled by, it's not as sick as that, the golden place, the mythical kingdom ruled by a man, this was the legend, he was a king who covers himself in gold dust every day and then washes it off in a sacred lake. And apparently he was in a lineage of kings that went back into like time immemorial. So they thought there was a lake there where like the king had been washing gold flakes off his entire body for thousands of years. So there was like a lake where like there's gold everywhere, but then at the bottom there's these like precious gold flakes. And they were like, they wanted those gold flakes and all the gold in the land and also the super yummy cinnamon to corner the spice market. So this was like on par in their heads with like, we're going to get the Cortez bag basically. Cinnamon and gold. They're like, this is going to be fucking nasty.
Yeah. We're going to be wealthy forever.
Exactly. And so begins the tale of their death-defying trek down the Amazon River. The first Europeans navigate its entire length, facing the otherworldly horrors of the Amazonian rainforest, people, creatures, starvation, which that was a big one, and whatever else. So that's all the prelude. We're just building right now, guys. Yeah. We're building the world, building the scene.
Yeah, a musket can't kill an alligator. It won't even like put a.
It would get them. It would scurry them off.
Yeah.
It would fuck them up, man. You're talking point blank shot.
Yeah.
And they called them back then. They called them harabuskiers. I don't know why. They call fucking muskets harabuskiers.
They had probably already seen alligators before, though, right? I'm trying to think of I'm just thinking of all the.
They probably
first
heard of them
times
because there was some Florida action going. There's probably some, I'd imagine there's some gators down there by the way of Mexico.
Okay,
But I don't know about those pythons, bro. Like
that. Just a giant monster-sized snake.
I don't know.
A 20-foot snake slithering at you.
Oh, dude, it would strangle. Like you would sleep and wake up, and it's got you, bro.
It's just your friend's gone, and the snake is a giant.
Your friend's crushed by a giant serpent. You haven't eaten in like 2 weeks. I would just eat that fucking snake, honestly. So here we go. Chapter 1. We weren't even in chapter 1 yet. Chapter 1. This is the making. We're gonna get to understand who is this guy, Francisco Orellana. However the fuck you say, I'll just call him Francisco O. Where's this guy from? You know, how do you forge a man that can navigate the Amazon River with no sonar, electricity, all that shit? So the book starts by painting a picture of the place called Extremadura. It's the rugged homeland of Francisco Orellana. It's a rocky pastoral land with not much going on. This place sucks, honestly. It's like ranch land. There's no great cities. There's no hope for young boys such as himself other than just basically, herding swine and cattle. So, and again, back then, it's kind of almost to this day in Europe, it's not like there's not a lot of social mobility. Like whatever family you're born into, it's kind of that, unless you achieve basically military glory. You're just, for all your days, you're going to herd swine and cattle in like a very unforgiving, shitty land. But the boys here, although a little hopeless, were formed under hundreds of years of battling the invading Moors. I think that was like honestly like an 800-year period. I could be wrong.
The invading black people? Is it like okay?
Blacks. The blacks have been coming through and smashing them for 800 years.
Woo! We up.
You guys almost had Spain. That was a snow bunny. Your ancestors found the snow bunnies.
You know what? I think I have one of those guys on my wall, like from that era. Yeah, in my house.
The Moors?
The like Moorish king painting. My grandma used to have an old Moorish king one that hangs up at the museum in Philly.
That's kind of tight.
Yeah, I got that in the crib. But like obviously the replica John.
That's kind of tight. But yeah, they've been battling, bro. They were battling. And so all they know, these boys, all they know is how to ride their Iberian horses and swing those big old swords made of Toledo steel. So that's all these guys did. They just like herded swine and cattle, but then they were very practiced in kind of like sword fighting. Mm-hmm. Like all these guys were like, let me out of here and let me go start hacking people up with my sword.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing like, it was just guys walking around farms, just fucking like if you were like they were like construction workers, but who just carried swords and be fucking doing like sword play. Just like autistic guys.
Yeah.
Who just walk around being like, fuck, dude, I'd fuck you up.
I'd kill you if they let me.
Yeah, they're like, dude, I swear to God, if I ever fucking sold, I would have fucking taken all their gold too. But these guys desperately wanted to elevate out of Extremadura because it was just really not much going on there. So, and the other thing, the thing that was getting them fired up too, from their like, it's a very hilly country, from the top of their hilly perches, they would just gaze upon like, broken ramparts, ruined castles, and kind of like granite remains of Roman arches. Mm. So they saw like the ruins of kind of like a former Roman era, and they would see that and they'd be pumped on Rome. They're pumped on conquistadors. They're like, dude, we gotta fucking get out there. So, and that was the thing. Like you're sitting there like breathing in pig farts all day. And everyone's like, dude, if you just get on a boat, you could be slashing dudes down.
Yeah.
Banging exotic babes and getting like a big ass fucking spread in some like cool tropical place. So these guys, I mean, it was literally Grand Theft Auto video game. They're going, you can play Grand Theft Auto in real life.
And your life sucks at that moment.
Life sucks, dude. You're literally jerking off in a field next to sheep all day. And it's just like half your family just dies. It just fucking sucked. And Francisco Orellana is like, bro, I want in. This is the only way I can boss up was through conquistador action.
So he was he was like a loser. He was living like not a loser's life, but kind of a loser.
He was
for the time.
Yeah, he was one of those guys that like he was in like their kind of like medieval caste system or whatever.
Yeah.
He was like I guess like maybe upper middle class.
Oh.
So like his family, he didn't really have much, but his family had ties allegedly to nobility because the Pizarros were his cousins somehow, and the Pizarros were like, dude, and he was well off enough to where Orellana had like a formal education.
Okay.
So he had like, he had extensive kind of like legal education. He was actually really good at languages, which kind of comes into play.
Is Pizarro the full name of pizza?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Just had to ask.
That's a good question because I think it's a Spain.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, maybe, I don't know. I actually we'll have to fact check that. But no, look up the name meaning of Pizarro. Actually, I'm kind of curious. We should know what the hell we're dealing with here. Cause this is like, the cool thing is, this is when dudes' last names, like you actually knew what the fuck the dude was about just by his last name. Kind of sick. What does Pizarro mean?
Pizarro literally means slate.
Slate?
Yeah. Or
Sick.
slate quarry.
Okay, so like rocks.
Yeah.
The Rock Brothers.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, that's cool. So Orellana's, this is his origins and early career. Just again, we're still building the character. Okay, so Francisco Orellana, he was born 1511. Okay, so like we said, he came from something of a prominent family. Again, they weren't like super nobility, but they were enough to be like, what the fuck was the term for those guys we talked about in Cortez's land when they were technically nobility, but it was only because of that war with the Moors that lasted 800 years that they had to keep giving people, because through military action, they kept rewarding people with this like title basically, but they were effectively they were commoners.
Yeah, okay.
God,
Like a special commoner.
There's a term for that. It's called
special commoner.
It's just like a guy who's in the military. He gets some perks.
General.
It was called like not a vaquero. What was the warrior caste? Whatever. It doesn't matter. We said it. Hey guys, go watch the other fucking ones. We can't be bringing fancy Spanish terms into every single thing. But it was
not the Super Bowl.
It was the caste Cortez came from, and there's a term for it was the Hidalgo.
Okay.
Hidalgo.
Save your fucking fancy computer and AI. You got it on here. Fuck, I might be wrong about that though. I believe it was the Hidalgo class, which was like, again, technically mobility.
Yeah.
But they didn't have all the cool shit to show for it. So
you have to earn it.
If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. You have to earn it by killing more people. Because, it's Hidalgo. Yeah, look, guys, we got it all up here. So, Orellana, like we said, he's something of a prominent family, but he still lives in shitty-ass Extremadura. And his claim to fame is being related to the famous Pizarro brothers, who, again, we'll learn about. But being their cousin was enough for Francisco Orellana to declare himself, this is what he declared himself, a gentleman of noble blood and a person of honor. So it's kind of a sick dating profile tagline.
Yeah.
I'm a person of noble blood, and I'm a gentleman of noble blood and a person of honor. So he like wrote that in his journal, being like, I'm not like these other guys. I'm a person of noble blood and a person of honor. And so at 16 years of age,
6 foot.
Orellana signs as a mercenary soldier during a Spanish expedition around Panama and Nicaragua and begins making a name for himself as an able soldier, gaining the attention and esteem of his cousin, the Pizarros, the famous Pizarros. But all of it didn't come for free, though. During these early years of his, military training and battle, Orellana lost an eye, which he then covered up with a sick eye patch.
Damn.
Which is kind of fucking tight.
Yeah.
So this whole time he was just a boy. Now he gets the eye patch, which, I don't know. I didn't realize that one of the guys in the book had an eye patch when I picked it up, and I was like, oh, it's kind of tight. Especially, I think they paint him as like the good guy too. So the good guy has the fucking eye patch.
He's badass.
Nice.
Yeah, pretty tight.
Dude, the famous Pizarro sounds like a circus.
Famous Pizarro brothers. There actually are something of a circus. These guys are fucking, they're wild bros, dude. So Orellana, while, he's vibing out on all the Pizarro brothers, and he's becoming like, he likes all of them. He was most intimately linked with, and this is his, brother on the journey of the Amazon, Gonzalo Pizarro. Gonzalo Pizarro is the second youngest of the 5 infamous brothers, sometimes referred to as the Brothers of Doom. How do you like that?
Ooh.
Referred to as the Brothers of Doom, and apparently out of the 5 brothers, only one died of natural causes, to give you a hint as to how they rolled.
Yeah.
These guys were playing high-stakes poker all the time.
Was he standing out of it, or was he just a beast?
Gonzalo was maybe the biggest dickhead out of all of his brothers. He was a complete fucking. This guy is a fucking asshole. Remember Conquistador? You read about Hernan Cortez. It was at least like, dude, I don't want to fucking have to like kill these guys. Like, I'll do it if I have to, but like, let's try to avoid this. Gonzalo Pizarro is fucking brutal from off the completely brutal from off the jump.
He drinks blood.
He's bad. He's a Bodman for sure. So, and again, not a lot's known about Gonzalo's personal thoughts and stuff. I don't think if he kept a journal, they didn't find it. He is remembered as being a tall, jacked, and hot soldier who could be brutal and crude, while also very, very skilled in the arts of warfare and combat.
He didn't make anybody write that.
Hey, that's just all whispered down the lane. Obviously, we have Orellana being like, I'm a noble man. Gonzalo, people are like, this guy's a fucking asshole.
The ad that he's hot to it is the part that's like,
He was a tall, hot fuck. He was like the Lannisters from Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
He was just like a rich, tall, hot, military-minded guy who, like, if he had a bone to pick with you, he was going to try to kill you for sure.
And are there any pictures of Gonzalo?
We can try to find one. There's,
I don't believe him.
if you don't think Gonzalo's hot,
Yeah.
I mean, hey, you know what? I didn't even think to look at this
tall
guy.
for the 1500s?
He was
Is he
probably
like my height,
Yeah,
5'7"?
5'6", 5'7".
Well,
Yeah.
that's a good point. I would just imagine.
I'm 5'8". That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, he probably was like 5'8", 5'9".
Yeah.
Probably my height. Probably 5'10". I feel like I'd be fucking Gonzalo Pizarro. If I beat you to it, dude, it's a problem. Gonzalo Pizarro picture. Damn, he's got me. You think he's mid? Hold on, dude. What do you think? You think he's lacking suborbital?
Yeah.
I'm trying to break it. I need you to break it down in clav terms.
Clavicular would mog the shit out.
You
of
would
me.
mog frame
Not
mog?
me, but clavicular.
You think clavic would mog him?
Yeah.
You talking frame
him
mog?
for
Or you
sure.
talking height? Talking looks?
Kind of looks smog, yeah.
What?
Here, sorry. He kind of has a Habsburg jaw type thing going on.
Can you
Yeah.
send me the pic? Actually, here, can I see it?
Yeah, I'll text it.
I can't see. Sorry, audio listener.
Sorry.
That's fine. I'll take your word. And on one, so like Abraham Lincoln is pretty chopped. Is he as chopped as Abe Lincoln?
Yeah, how chopped is Gonzalo?
He's pretty chopped. I think they might be neck and neck. to be
Chopped.
honest.
What?
Look, check him out.
He's chopped mask or chopped femme?
chopped mask for sure.
Hold on, dude. What are you talking about? This guy swagged the fuck out. That's an oil painting.
I respect the beard.
Yo, what are you talking about? He doesn't look like Abraham Lincoln. You're just fucking hating on him. This guy's a fucking masked baddie.
He has Borat face though.
Clav mogs him.
You think Clav mogs him?
Yep.
I don't know. He beard mogs Clav.
True.
He's got a sick. Okay,
He's
fair enough.
test
Fair enough.
mogging.
Okay, we're already running into controversy.
Just my personal.
Okay, so let's do a deep dive on the Pizarros because we talked about Gonzalo. Where's Gonzalo? What's this garden he's growing in? Quick deep dive on the Pizarros just to get a sense as to who Francisco Orellana is kind of like linking up with. Who are these guys? First matter of record is that the Pizarro boys were more like the step or half brothers of Doom. Their father, Captain Gonzalo Pizarro, fathered 11 children with many baby madres. Out of these 11 kids, 5 were the brothers, the rest were girls. And out of these 5 boys, only Hernando was a legitimate. The rest, Francisco, Juan, Francisco Martin, and Gonzalo, bastards.
Damn.
They're the bastard brothers of Doom. These guys are they're all bastards except for one guy, which back then was a big deal.
Was he the guy that died of old age too? The one that wasn't a bastard?
Yeah, he was the only one. He didn't carry that bastard chip on his shoulder. So yeah, I'm almost positive that was the guy who actually got to die of natural causes. So out of the Doom brothers, Francisco, not Francisco Martin, was the oldest and had been in the Conquistador game since 1501, 10 years before Orellana was even born. By 1524, Francisco, the oldest one, had completely bossed up, put together his own expedition, leaving Panama for the coast of Colombia, where he actually got his squad tossed by the natives. And so then he's like, all right, he touched down on South America. And he goes, I think it's something to it. Cause he's in the Caribbean before that. He's like, there's something to that area. I'm going to go back and link up with 2 of my friends, Hernando de Luque and Diego de Almagro. And he forms a private corporation. This comes into play later, Company of the Levant. So he's like, dude, I got fucked up by the guys there. However, that's a whole country. Let's go get it. Let's do, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. We're all in on this. We're all bros.
Imagine being a soldier in the early 1500s. You've crossed an ocean so vast that most Europeans still believe monsters live in it. You've marched through jungles where the air itself feels alive, buzzing with insects, dripping with humidity, and hiding predators you can't even name. Your boots are rotting. Your food is gone. Half your companions are already dead. And your commander, standing ahead of you with mud up to his knees and a sword hanging from his belt, has just made an announcement. You're not going back. Not across the ocean. Not to safety. Not even to the ships you arrived on, because he's just ordered them burned. No retreat. No rescue. No second chances. From this moment on, there is only one direction left to go. Forward. Into the unknown. Now this might sound like the plot of an action movie, but it actually happened. In the year 1519, a small group of Spanish explorers, led by a man named Hernán Cortés, launched one of the most insane expeditions in human history. What started as a risky gamble for gold turned into something far bigger. A journey that would topple empires, reshape continents, and permanently change the course of world history. They would march hundreds of miles into a massive civilization they barely understood. They would face armies numbering in the tens of thousands. They would be trapped inside a foreign capital. And at one point, they would have to fight their way out of a city while carrying stolen treasure. Across bridges that were being destroyed behind them. It was reckless. It was brutal. And by all logic, it should have ended in total disaster. But somehow, against impossible odds, this expedition didn't just survive, it changed the world forever. This is the story of one of the craziest journeys ever attempted. The expedition that brought down the Aztec Empire. And the deeper you look into it, the more unbelievable it becomes. Because this wasn't just a story about exploration. It was a story about ambition, betrayal, luck, misunderstanding, and one of the most dangerous decisions a leader has ever made. So how did a few hundred exhausted men manage to walk into the heart of one of the most powerful civilizations in the Americas and bring it crashing down? Well, to understand that, we have to go back to a time when the world was much bigger and far more mysterious than anyone realized. To understand why this expedition happened at all, you have to step into the mindset of Europe in the early 1500s, a world that was suddenly expanding faster than anyone had imagined. For centuries, Europeans believed the world was relatively small. Most people thought the known continents, Europe, Asia, and Africa, were basically the whole story. The edges of maps were often decorated with sea monsters and strange warnings. Then, in 1492, everything changed. A Genoese sailor named Christopher Columbus sailed west across the Atlantic under the Spanish flag. He was trying to find a shortcut to Asia. Instead, he crashed into an entirely different world. Within a few decades, Spain realized something astonishing. There were entire continents sitting across the ocean, filled with land, resources, and civilizations that Europeans had never known existed. And suddenly, the race was on. Spain, Portugal, and later other European powers began launching expeditions across the Atlantic, hoping to discover new trade routes, territories, and, most importantly, gold. Lots of gold. Stories started spreading through Spanish ports about strange lands filled with unimaginable wealth. Sailors talked about cities built from stone, markets overflowing with goods, and rulers who wore ornaments made of pure gold. Some of these stories were exaggerated, some were misunderstood, and some were absolutely true. One of the most powerful civilizations in the Americas at that time was the Aztec Empire. At its peak, the empire controlled millions of people across central Mexico. It was a complex society with massive cities, advanced agriculture, organized trade networks, and powerful armies. At the center of this empire stood one of the most remarkable cities in the world, Tenochtitlan. Built on an island in the middle of a large lake, Tenochtitlan was connected to the mainland by long stone causeways. The city had canals running through it like streets, bustling marketplaces, towering temples, and an estimated population of over 200,000 people. To Europeans of the time, cities that large were almost unimaginable. When later Spanish soldiers first saw it, many compared it to Venice, or even claimed it was more impressive. But in 1519, the Spanish didn't fully understand what they were dealing with. All they knew were rumors. Rumors of gold, rumors of powerful rulers, rumors of cities hidden deep inland. And for ambitious men looking to become rich overnight, that was more than enough motivation. Now, Spain had already begun establishing colonies in the Caribbean. One of the most important early centers of Spanish activity was the island of Cuba. From there, Spanish governors organized expeditions to explore the mainland of the Americas. Some of these expeditions returned with small amounts of gold and stories of enormous civilizations further inland. Others simply vanished. But each report made the mystery more tempting. Somewhere beyond the coast of Mexico, people believed there might be entire kingdoms filled with treasure, and whoever reached them first could become unbelievably wealthy. In this world of ambition and opportunity, a new type of man began to appear across the Spanish frontier. They were called conquistadors, soldiers, adventurers, fortune hunters. These men weren't necessarily nobles or aristocrats. Many were younger sons who had little chance of inheriting land back in Spain. Others were veterans of Europe's wars looking for new opportunities. They were tough, aggressive, and extremely ambitious, and they were willing to risk everything for glory and wealth. One of these men, perhaps the most ambitious of all, was a Spanish officer who had already built a reputation as clever, persuasive, and dangerously determined. His name was Hernán Cortés, and by the late 1510s, Cortés had become obsessed with one idea. Somewhere on the mainland of Mexico, there was a civilization far richer than anything Spain had yet encountered. If he could reach it first, if he could claim it in the name of Spain, he wouldn't just become wealthy, he would become legendary. But there was one problem. The governor of Cuba wasn't entirely sure he trusted Cortés, and that distrust would soon lead to one of the boldest and craziest decisions in the entire history of exploration. Because Cortés wasn't just planning an expedition. He was about to launch a gamble so reckless, it could either make him one of the most famous men in history or get him executed for treason. Every insane expedition needs the right kind of leader. Not necessarily the smartest person in the room, not necessarily the most experienced, but someone with a very specific combination of qualities: ambition, charisma, and just enough recklessness to attempt something that rational people would never try. In 1519, that man was Hernán Cortés. Cortés didn't come from a powerful noble family. In fact, by Spanish aristocratic standards, his background was fairly modest. He was born in 1485 in the Spanish town of Medellín, the son of a minor nobleman with limited wealth. As a young man, Cortés was supposed to study law. That didn't last long. Instead, he became fascinated by the stories coming back from the New World. Tales of exploration, conquest, and unimaginable fortunes waiting across the Atlantic. So in his early 20s, he did what many ambitious young Spaniards were doing at the time. He left Europe. Cortés sailed to the Caribbean, where Spain was rapidly building its first colonial footholds. Over the years, he gained experience as a soldier, administrator, and explorer. But what truly set Cortés apart wasn't just his military ability, it was his personality. He was incredibly persuasive. Contemporaries often described him as charming, intelligent, and extremely confident, sometimes dangerously confident. He had a talent for convincing people to follow him, even when his plans seemed borderline insane. And he had one other defining trait. Cortés wanted glory, not just money, not just land. He wanted to become one of the great names in Spanish history. By the late 1510s, Cortés was living on the island of Cuba, which had become an important base for Spanish expeditions. The governor of Cuba at the time was Diego Velázquez de Cuellar. Velázquez had originally supported Cortés. In fact, he selected him to lead an expedition to explore the mainland of Mexico after earlier voyages reported wealthy civilizations inland. At first, the plan seemed simple. Cortés would sail to the mainland, investigate the region, establish trade relationships if possible, and return with information. But Velázquez soon began hearing rumors about Cortés. Rumors that Cortés wasn't planning to simply explore. Rumors that he intended to launch a full conquest. And that made the governor nervous. After all, if Cortés became too successful, he might become difficult to control. And in the rigid political system of the Spanish Empire, power was supposed to flow through official channels, not through ambitious adventurers acting on their own. So Velázquez tried to cancel the expedition, but by that point, it was already too late. Cortés had spent months preparing. He had recruited hundreds of soldiers, sailors, and adventurers who believed this mission might make them rich. They had ships. They had weapons. They had horses, something that would prove absolutely terrifying to many indigenous peoples who had never seen them before. And most importantly, they had momentum. In early 1519, Cortés made a decision that would define his entire legacy. Instead of waiting for permission, he sailed anyway. With 11 ships, around 500 soldiers, a handful of cannons, and a dream of conquering a mysterious empire inland, Cortés left Cuba and headed toward the Mexican coast. Technically speaking, this was now an illegal expedition. If it failed, Cortés could be arrested or executed for disobeying the governor. But if it succeeded, the rewards would be enormous. Now, on the other side of the ocean, another powerful figure was watching events unfold, although he had no idea just how dangerous the situation would soon become. The ruler of the Aztec Empire was Moctezuma II. Moctezuma governed one of the most powerful states in the Americas. Under his rule, the empire collected tribute from dozens of cities and controlled vast trade networks. But the empire wasn't perfectly stable. Many conquered peoples resented Aztec rule. They were forced to pay heavy tributes and provide captives for religious sacrifices. To outsiders, the empire looked incredibly strong, but beneath the surface, there were cracks, and Cortés would soon discover them. But perhaps the most important figures in this entire story weren't kings or governors. They were the people caught between two worlds. One of them was a woman known to history as La Malinche. She would become Cortés's translator, cultural interpreter, and one of the most controversial figures in Mexican history. Because in a conflict between two civilizations that barely understood each other, language and trust would become powerful weapons. And as Cortés and his small army stepped onto the shores of Mexico in 1519, neither side yet realized just how explosive this encounter would become. What started as a cautious meeting between strangers was about to turn into one of the most dramatic and dangerous expeditions the world had ever seen. In the spring of 1519, the ships finally reached the coast of what is now Mexico. After weeks at sea, the small Spanish fleet anchored near the Gulf Coast. The soldiers stepped onto unfamiliar sand, surrounded by a landscape that looked completely different from anything they had known in Europe or the Caribbean. Dense jungles stretched inland. Strange birds screamed from the trees. And somewhere beyond those forests, according to rumors, there was a massive empire. But before Cortés could march inland, he had to solve a problem: his own men. Many of the soldiers who joined the expedition had assumed they would explore the coast, gather information, and return to Cuba. Now that they were staring at the unknown interior of an enormous continent, some of them were starting to get nervous. After all, they were outnumbered by millions. They had only a few hundred soldiers, and their legal authority was questionable at best. Cortés understood something critical about leadership in moments like this. If his men believed they could simply return to the ships and sail home, fear would eventually win. So he made a decision that would become one of the most legendary and controversial moments in exploration history. He removed the option of retreat. The ships were destroyed. Whether they were burned or dismantled is still debated by historians. But the message was unmistakable. There was no going back. The only path left was forward. Imagine standing on that beach as a soldier. Your transportation home is gone. Your commander has committed you to marching into an unknown land filled with unknown armies. And the only way you will ever see Spain again is if the expedition succeeds. It was an insane gamble. But strangely enough, it worked. With retreat no longer possible, the men focused on survival and progress. Soon after landing, Cortés founded a small settlement called Veracruz. This wasn't just a camp. It was a clever political move. By establishing a Spanish town and forming a local governing council, Cortés created a legal technicality that allowed him to claim he was acting directly in the name of the Spanish king, rather than under the authority of the Cuban governor who had tried to stop him. In other words, he had just rewritten the rules of the expedition. Now the march inland could begin. At first, the journey was brutal. The Spanish soldiers struggled through tropical heat and difficult terrain. Supplies were limited, and the men constantly worried about hostile encounters. But something unexpected began happening. Instead of facing unified resistance, Cortés began meeting groups that were willing to help him. Remember those cracks in the Aztec Empire? Cortés quickly realized they were deeper than he had imagined. Many indigenous communities had been conquered by the Aztecs and forced to pay heavy tributes. They were required to send goods, labor, and sometimes even people to the capital for religious sacrifices. Resentment toward the Aztec rulers had been building for years, and now, suddenly, a strange group of foreign warriors had arrived. Warriors with steel swords. Warriors riding animals that looked like monsters. Warriors carrying weapons that exploded with thunder and smoke. To many indigenous groups, these newcomers seemed both terrifying and potentially useful. One of the most important alliances Cortés formed was with the Tlaxcalans. At first, the Tlaxcalans fought the Spanish fiercely. For days, brutal battles erupted between the two sides. The Spanish had superior weapons, but the Tlaxcalans had overwhelming numbers and deep knowledge of the terrain. Eventually, however, the Tlaxcalans made a surprising decision. Instead of continuing to fight the Spanish, they joined them. To the Tlaxcalans, the Aztecs were a far greater enemy than these strange foreigners. This alliance would become one of the most important turning points in the entire expedition, because suddenly, Cortés wasn't leading just a few hundred Spanish soldiers anymore. He was leading thousands of indigenous allies. As the expedition marched deeper into central Mexico, stories of the strange newcomers began spreading across the region. Reports reached the imperial capital. Reports about pale-skinned warriors riding giant deer. Reports about weapons that produced thunder. Reports about cities falling into alliances with these outsiders. And eventually, the news reached the ruler of the Aztec Empire. The emperor, Moctezuma II, faced an impossible decision. Should he attack these newcomers immediately? Should he ignore them? Or should he attempt diplomacy? Moctezuma chose the third option. He began sending gifts, gold, precious fabrics, ornaments. From the emperor's perspective, this might have been an attempt to impress the foreigners, or even persuade them to leave. But for the Spanish soldiers, the gifts had the opposite effect. They proved something incredible. The rumors were true. There really was enormous wealth inside the Aztec Empire. And if Cortés had been motivated before, he was now absolutely determined to reach the capital. Soon, after months of marching through mountains, valleys, and hostile territory, the expedition finally approached one of the greatest cities in the world. A city rising from the middle of a lake. A city larger than almost anything the Spanish had ever seen. They had reached Tenochtitlan, and what happened next would become one of the most shocking encounters in world history. In November 1519, after months of marching across mountains, jungles, and hostile territories, the expedition finally reached the edge of a vast lake. And what the Spanish soldiers saw next completely stunned them. Rising out of the water was a city unlike anything they had ever imagined. Long stone causeways stretched across the lake like bridges. Canoes moved through shimmering canals. White temples towered above the skyline, reflecting sunlight across the water. This was Tenochtitlan. For the Spanish soldiers, it felt almost surreal. Many of them had expected a collection of villages or small towns. Instead, they were staring at one of the largest cities on Earth. At the time, Tenochtitlan likely had a population of over 200,000 people, larger than most European cities. The streets were clean, the marketplaces were organized, and the architecture was impressive. One Spanish soldier later wrote that the sight of the city made them feel as if they were dreaming. But the most incredible part was still to come. Standing at the entrance of the city, waiting to greet them, was the emperor himself, Moctezuma II. According to Spanish accounts, Moctezuma arrived in magnificent clothing, decorated with precious stones and feathers. Nobles surrounded him, and attendants carefully held ornate canopies above his head. For a moment, two completely different worlds faced each other. On one side, a small group of exhausted foreign soldiers who had crossed an ocean and marched hundreds of miles inland. On the other, the ruler of a powerful empire that had dominated central Mexico for generations. And incredibly, Moctezuma welcomed them. The Spanish were invited into the city as honored guests. It was a moment filled with uncertainty, misunderstanding, and cautious diplomacy. Some historians believe Moctezuma hoped to avoid conflict by treating the newcomers with respect. Others suggest he wanted to study them carefully before deciding what to do next. But for Cortés, the situation presented an opportunity too tempting to ignore. Within days of entering the city, he made one of the boldest and most dangerous moves of the entire expedition. He captured the emperor. Yes, with only a few hundred soldiers inside a city of hundreds of thousands, Cortés somehow managed to take Moctezuma hostage inside his own palace. It sounds impossible, but through a mixture of intimidation, strategic pressure, and careful planning, Cortés convinced Moctezuma to remain under Spanish protection. Technically, the emperor still ruled. In reality, he was now a prisoner. For several months, the situation inside Tenochtitlan remained strangely tense, but relatively calm. The Spanish soldiers lived inside the palace complex, guarded the emperor, and began collecting gold from across the empire. More and more treasure flowed into the city. Gold statues, jewelry, ornaments, precious objects gathered from temples and tribute cities. To the Spanish soldiers, it looked like unimaginable wealth. But outside the palace walls, tension was building. The Aztec population was becoming increasingly uneasy about the presence of foreign soldiers controlling their emperor. And then, everything exploded. While Cortés was temporarily away dealing with another Spanish force that had arrived from Cuba, one of his commanders made a disastrous decision. During a major Aztec religious festival, Spanish troops suddenly attacked. Inside a crowded ceremonial courtyard, they began killing Aztec nobles and priests. The massacre was brutal and shocking. When news of the attack spread across the city, the reaction was immediate. The population of Tenochtitlan rose in revolt. Suddenly, the Spanish soldiers were trapped. They had only a few hundred men inside a massive hostile city. Stones and spears rained down from rooftops. Barricades appeared across the streets. The expedition that had marched triumphantly into the capital was now fighting for survival. Cortés returned to find the situation collapsing around him. Desperate to calm the rebellion, the Spanish brought Moctezuma out onto a balcony and ordered him to speak to his people. But by this point, the emperor's authority had shattered. As he tried to address the angry crowd below, stones began flying. In the chaos, Moctezuma was struck. Shortly afterward, he died. And with the emperor gone, all remaining restraint disappeared. The Spanish were now surrounded by tens of thousands of enemies. Food supplies were running out. The causeways leading out of the city were heavily defended. If they stayed, they would be destroyed. If they tried to leave, they would have to fight their way through one of the most physical. By the summer of 1520, the situation inside Tenochtitlan had become completely unsustainable for the Spanish. The city was no longer a place of diplomacy or uneasy peace. It had turned into a battlefield. The Spanish soldiers were trapped inside a hostile capital, surrounded by thousands of Aztec warriors determined to drive them out. Food was running low, water supplies were becoming difficult to secure, and every rooftop had become a potential attack position. Cortés realized something brutal but unavoidable. They had to escape, and they had to do it quickly. But escaping Tenochtitlan wasn't simple. Remember, the city sat on an island in the middle of a lake, connected to the mainland by a handful of long stone causeways. These causeways were narrow, elevated roads, with gaps that could be easily destroyed to stop an invading army. And now, those same causeways had become traps. Still, Cortés had no choice. On the night of June 30th, 1520, the Spanish attempted their desperate escape. Under cover of darkness, hundreds of Spanish soldiers and thousands of their indigenous allies quietly began moving along the causeway leading out of the city. But there was one problem. The soldiers were carrying treasure. During their time in the capital, the Spanish had collected enormous amounts of gold and valuable objects. Many of the soldiers stuffed their armor and packs with as much treasure as they could carry. After all, they had risked their lives for this expedition. No one wanted to leave empty-handed. But that decision would soon turn into a deadly mistake. As the column moved across the causeway, the Aztecs discovered the escape attempt. Suddenly, war drums echoed across the lake. Warriors flooded onto the causeways. Canoes filled with Aztec fighters swarmed through the surrounding water, attacking from all sides. What followed was chaos. In the darkness, the Spanish soldiers tried to fight their way forward while under constant attack. Arrows and spears rained down from rooftops and boats. Some soldiers fell into the water, and because many of them were weighed down with stolen gold, they drowned. Others were dragged from the causeway and captured. Entire sections of the road had been destroyed, forcing soldiers to leap across dangerous gaps while being attacked. The retreat quickly turned into a disaster. By the time the survivors finally reached the mainland, hundreds of Spanish soldiers had been killed, along with thousands of their indigenous allies. Many of the expedition's cannons were lost. Most of the treasure was gone. The event would become known as La Noche Triste. La Noche Triste, the Night of Sorrows. According to tradition, Cortés himself sat beneath a tree outside the city and wept as he realized how badly the retreat had gone. At that moment, it seemed like the entire expedition had failed. But the story didn't end there. Even after such a devastating defeat, Cortés refused to abandon the campaign. Instead, he regrouped. The survivors retreated to the territory of their allies, particularly the Tlaxcalans, who continued supporting the Spanish against the Aztecs. And slowly, Cortés began rebuilding his forces. But something else was happening across central Mexico at the same time. Something far more destructive than any army: disease. When the Spanish arrived in the Americas, they unknowingly brought illnesses from Europe that the indigenous population had never encountered before. One of the most devastating was smallpox. Within months of the Spanish arrival, smallpox began spreading through the Aztec Empire. The results were catastrophic. Entire communities were struck down. Cities lost huge portions of their population. Even Aztec leadership was affected. The empire that had once seemed unstoppable was suddenly struggling to survive. Cortés understood the opportunity. Over the next year, he gathered a massive coalition of indigenous allies who wanted to overthrow Aztec rule. Thousands of warriors joined his campaign. He also built small ships, brigantines, that could be used to control the waters of the lake surrounding Tenochtitlan. And in 1521, Cortés returned. This time, he wasn't sneaking into the city as a guest. He was coming back to conquer it. What followed was a long and brutal siege. Spanish forces and their indigenous allies cut off food supplies, attacked the city from multiple directions, and slowly destroyed the causeways and defenses surrounding the capital. Day by day, Tenochtitlan was reduced to ruins. After months of fighting, starvation, and disease, the Aztec capital finally fell in August 1521. One of the most powerful civilizations in the Americas had collapsed, and the insane expedition that began with just a few hundred men on a distant shore had completely reshaped the history of an entire continent. The most dangerous cities in the world. What happened next would become known as one of the darkest nights in Spanish military history. A desperate escape attempt across narrow bridges in total darkness while carrying stolen treasure. It would be remembered forever as La Noche Triste, the Night of Sorrows. When the fighting finally ended in August 1521, the once great city of Tenochtitlan was almost unrecognizable. The canals that had once been filled with trading canoes were clogged with debris. Temples that had towered above the skyline lay shattered. Entire districts had been reduced to rubble after months of siege, starvation, and relentless fighting. What had once been one of the most impressive cities in the world had become a ruin. The fall of the city marked the collapse of the Aztec Empire. For centuries, the empire had dominated central Mexico through military strength, tribute networks, and powerful religious authority. Now, within just a few years of first contact with Europeans, that entire political system had been dismantled. But the outcome of the expedition didn't simply mean the end of one empire. It marked the beginning of an entirely new era. On the ruins of Tenochtitlan, the Spanish would soon build a new colonial capital, Mexico City. From there, Spain would expand its control across huge parts of the Americas, establishing what would become known as New Spain, one of the largest colonial territories in history. The consequences were enormous. New trade routes connected Europe, the Americas, Africa, and Asia. Silver mined from Mexico and Peru would flow across the world, fueling global commerce and reshaping entire economies. Crops from the Americas, corn, potatoes, tomatoes, chocolate, would spread across Europe and beyond. Meanwhile, European animals, languages, and cultures would reshape the societies of the Americas. Historians sometimes call this massive exchange of plants, animals, people, and ideas the Columbian Exchange. And the expedition led by Hernán Cortés played a major role in accelerating that transformation. But the story is also far more complicated and far more tragic than simple tales of exploration or conquest. Because while Cortés and his soldiers became wealthy and famous, millions of indigenous people across the Americas would suffer devastating consequences. Diseases like smallpox spread rapidly through populations with no natural immunity. Entire communities disappeared within decades. Cultures that had developed over thousands of years were suddenly forced to adapt to a completely new political and social reality. And yet, despite all of this upheaval, indigenous cultures did not vanish. They survived. Languages, traditions, and identities continued to evolve, blending old worlds and new in ways that still shape the Americas today. Looking back at the expedition itself, what makes it so extraordinary isn't just the final outcome. It's how unlikely the entire story was. A few hundred Spanish soldiers crossing an ocean, marching hundreds of miles into unfamiliar territory, entering one of the largest cities in the world, getting trapped inside it, barely escaping with their lives, and then returning to conquer it. By any logical calculation, the expedition should have failed. The numbers were against them. The terrain was against them. The political situation was incredibly fragile. Yet through a mix of ambition, alliances, misunderstanding, technological advantage, and sheer luck, history took a different path. And sometimes that's the strange thing about history. It isn't always shaped by the largest armies or the most powerful empires. Sometimes it changes because a small group of people make decisions that seem completely insane at the time. Burning the ships, marching inland, attempting a midnight escape with pockets full of gold. These were not cautious choices. They were reckless gambles. But those gambles helped trigger one of the most dramatic turning points in global history. The expedition of Hernán Cortés didn't just conquer a city. It opened the door to a new world order that would reshape continents, economies, and cultures for centuries. And it all started with a decision made on a distant beach in 1519 and decided there was no turning back.